come closer? Come closer. You don't mind. Halloween? Yeah. What? You'll find out. Okay. Thank you for being here. This is our largest group so far. So this presentation has to do with the EEOC, which is governed by the government, the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. It's really important that we do these trainings every year. I know some of you have done it through ADP, bless you. But ultimately, we are mandated to make sure everybody has taken this training and that we report it. So I do have to report that not only you attended, but you were here throughout the whole time. And so just know that that's why we're doing this. And I'm hoping for next year it's more online than it is anything. But for now, because it's that legal, I do have Melina here from Jackson Lewis. She is one of the councils that we typically work with. And following her presentation will be mine, and it'll be kind of short and simple when it comes down to HR itself. All right, so with no further ado, this is recorded, just so you know, and that's just because we need to also make sure that we have proof that it happened. So I'll bring it over to Melina. Thank you.
All right, good afternoon, everybody. As she said, my name is Melina Vallaneres. I'm here to teach you guys about employment best practices, know your rights as employees here at Quail-Run, both under the state of New Mexico and federal. And basically, I'm here to prevent Tanya from meeting me if there's any legal issues. So let's get started. You're going to learn about your responsibilities as an employee. You know, I just said you're going to learn rights, but you do have responsibilities under the law that we will learn about today. You're also going to learn about specifically what is bullying and what is harassment in the workplace, as well as disciplinary actions that are legally allowed. And basically, why are we here today? Because, you know, everyone wants a workplace where everyone is treated with respect and dignity. You know, that sounds pretty basic, right? Treat everyone how you want to be treated, but unfortunately, a lot of people don't do that in the workplace. So yes, this is why a lot of these trainings are required now, and it is why I'm here. So equal employment opportunity, Tanya did mention this, EEO laws. There basically means that no discrimination in employment is allowed on the basis of protected characteristics, and just a few protected characteristics on here are gender, race, national origin, religion, etc. The list is large, and we're going to explore that a little bit more as to what it means, again, under federal law and under New Mexico law. And we're also going to learn about what specifically do these protected characteristics have to do with harassment. So again, here are a few protected categories: race, color, national origin, religion, sex, pregnancy, age, disability, veteran status, sexual orientation. The list is expansive, and it does continue to expand, of course, as the times change. The law does change. That's the great thing about the law. Pregnancy and sexual orientation were not always part of a protected category. They were not always protected categories, but now they are. The state of New Mexico, under the New Mexico Human Rights Act, had pregnancy. The federal law did not. So now pregnancy is protected both federally and statewide, and same with sexual orientation. So just keep in mind that protected categories do keep expanding, and we expect it to expand, of course, as times keep changing. Again, why are we here, right? Equal employment opportunity and discrimination and harassment policies that we will learn today. We will learn specifically Quail-Run's policy. And it's important to do so because it's the right thing to do, first of all. And it's also the best way to create a workplace that promotes dignity and respect. And it's also important for continued success. Both your success as an employee, right, your own personal development, your own personal growth, but also the continued success of the company, of Quail-Run. you can't really have a good working environment. You can't be productive when people are not getting along, when people feel discriminated against, and we'll learn a little bit more about how exactly that impacts individuals. It's also important to learn this because it does establish a high standard of respect and professionalism. Again, that's very repetitive, right? You're gonna keep hearing respect, you're gonna keep hearing professionalism. But this is why I'm here today, because people forget to do these in the workplace. It's really unfortunate, but it does happen way too often. It's not too bad for me because I have a job, but it does happen way too often. And then, it is important to learn company policy. You all signed the employee handbook when you were hired. That gives you rights and it gives you responsibilities. And Quail-Run has legal obligations under that handbook that you may or may not be well aware of already, but we're going to explore a little bit more. And it's important to be alert. You have to know when discrimination, harassment, and bullying are taking place, so you know when to report it, if you want to report it, and we are going to learn about how exactly to report it pursuant to Quail-Run policy. And I just mentioned reporting inappropriate conduct, right? It's important to know everything so you know when to report something that is inappropriate. And some consequences of inappropriate behavior. It does create a barrier to communication and working effectively. Of course, Quail-Run doesn't want that. Quail-Run wants you guys to be able to work cohesively and effectively with one another. When there's inappropriate behavior going on, obviously that creates a barrier to how you communicate with one another, and that does affect your product, that does affect your morale, which in turn affects the company. And it's not so much about the company itself, but they are invested in making sure that you guys are happy as employees and that you want to actually come to work and you feel respected at work. So to dig in a little bit more about the importance of communication, workers who are highly connected with their coworkers see a 92% increase in professional growth. That's pretty obvious, right? The more comfortable you feel with your coworkers, the more friendly you are, the more you feel respected. You're going to be able to ask them questions, learn from each other, all the nice things, and you will increase professionally because you'll have a support system, you won't feel disrespected. So that's why it's greatly important to be able to communicate respectfully with one another. And part of this is giving positive feedback to each other. It's a simple way to show appreciation to your coworkers and foster positive relationships. So that way, all work together to create a great working environment and get your tasks done and you get to go home and be happy. So how do we do this? Well, you should be direct and specific, go into details of performance or the task that's being executed, and be respectful, of course. So basically, if you want to give positive feedback to your coworker, talk to them about the actual task. Don't talk to them about themselves. So that goes on to our next point. Assess the situation, not the person. Don't, it's okay to compliment each other, say, I like the way you administered this task, I like the way you did this, but keep it away from the person individually. Again, comment on the result of the work, not them personally, because that's, once you start commenting on personal adjectives and things like that, that's when we get close to crossing that little line of potential disrespect, potential comments on protected characteristics, and you want to avoid that. And always give feedback more than one. What does this mean? If you have something nice to say or something, that's constructive criticism, do it alone. Don't do it in front of other people. Obviously, that can create a lot of problems. Even if it's positive feedback and you say it to one employee, and there's another coworker present, you're going to make that coworker feel left out. And feeling left out is actually part of bullying that we're going to learn about later on. But even if it's positive, it can be turned into a negative thing. So it's always better to give each other constructive feedback one-on-one. And same thing with negative or constructive criticism. If you want to tell someone or suggest to them, hey, I feel like this is how you can do this task a little quicker. I noticed that you did it a little bit slow. Same thing, you don't want to say that in front of somebody else because they might embarrass them and it could create some problems. So that's just some simple ways on giving feedback to each other. Okay, is it illegal or inappropriate? And some general guiding principles on determining whether conduct is illegal or inappropriate, because not all inappropriate conduct is illegal. So a good way to learn this is always follow the policy, right? The policy, the Quail-Run employee handbook contains a policy of what is considered inappropriate conduct. It says not to do it. Not all inappropriate conduct is illegal, but even if it's not illegal, you still shouldn't do it in the workplace. So just follow the policy, basic thing. There's a nice little acronym, ABC, appropriate business conduct. Again, be professional. I know that's redundant, but people forget to act appropriate. So that's a nice acronym to remember. Treat others with the same respect that you would like people to treat you and your family members. Again, redundant, but people do forget it. And as I was just discussing, including when you're giving feedback to your coworkers. So you might think that it's whatever, I just am letting her know that she could have done this better, and I feel like she didn't do that great of a job. But be respectful, don't make someone feel little, don't make them feel like a certain way. It all comes down to communication, and you don't want to be engaging in any type of inappropriate conduct, whether legal or not. Also reporting inappropriate conduct to allow for a prompt investigation. We're going to explore this a little bit more later on. And of course, Quail-Run will take any reports seriously, no matter how big or small. So even if you think that I'm not going to report this comment because it's so small and it doesn't mean anything, go ahead and report it if you want to report it. I mean, Quail-Run will take everything seriously. It's their duty under the law, and it's their duty as just a company with good policy. So, okay, so now we're going to learn about what harassment is specifically. It's not just sexual harassment, that's the first point, because a lot of people think harassment is sexual harassment, and that's not true. Harassment literally means the discrimination that is directed at an employee due to any protected characteristic. So remember those protected characteristics that we were talking about earlier: religion, race, national origin. Any discrimination that's directed to another person due to those protected categories, that is harassment. So yes, it includes offensive behavior based on stereotypes about a protected class and behavior that is intended to cause discomfort or humiliation because of a protected characteristic. So note that it's offensive behavior. It's not just comments, it's also your body language, it's also how you actually treat someone. So don't think that it just depends on what you say. It's not just verbal, it's also your actual conduct. So going on to that, harassment includes any expression of contempt or hatred for a group in which the victim belongs to. So yeah, any expression of contempt. It can literally be a facial gesture. It can be any type of body language that can be perceived as being hateful towards someone. And now we're going to talk about sexual harassment. So that is unwelcome sexual advances, requests for sexual favors, and other moral or physical conduct of a sexual nature that constitutes sexual harassment when the submission to such conduct is made either explicitly or implicitly a term or condition of an individual's employment. Submission to or rejection of such conduct by an individual is used as the basis for employment decisions, or such conduct has the purpose or effect of unreasonably interfering with an individual's work performance or creating an intimidating, hostile, or offensive work environment. I know it's a lot of information to take in, but we're going to break it down a little bit more in the next few slides. So there's two types of unlawful harassment. The first one is called quid pro quo. This literally means this for that. And the definition is it has to be someone in management that conditions an aspect of employment on a submission to a sexual advance or favor. Quid pro quo, this for that. And then we have hostile work environment, which has to be unwelcome. It has to be sexual or based off of another protected category. So for example, race or age, and then it has to be severe or pervasive. This is not required in all states. I have it in parentheses because in New Mexico, if you want to claim that there's a hostile work environment legally, it has to meet the severe or pervasive element. So you might think that you have a legal claim for hostile work environment, but if it's not severe or pervasive, New Mexico courts won't see it as severe or pervasive, then it's not a hostile work environment. Why is this important to know? Because just because it's not actually severe or pervasive doesn't mean you can't report it in the workplace. That doesn't mean that Quail-Run won't investigate it. They will. So just because you think that there's a hostile work environment, but it's not severe or pervasive, you can still report it. So just because it's not necessarily illegal conduct doesn't mean that nobody will take you seriously, basically. And yes, not petty slights or trivial inconveniences. Petty slights, basically, you know, some people will claim that a coworker looks at them weird, and they think that's a hostile work environment. But if it's not severe or pervasive, a New Mexico court won't deem it to be a hostile work environment. For you guys here, doesn't matter, no matter how small or how big, still report it, because Quail-Run is invested in making sure that each and every one of you feels comfortable in your work environment and you feel comfortable enough to report anything that bothers you, as far as, you know, harassment or discriminatory behavior. Of course, it has to be offensive to a reasonable person, so don't go around reporting, you know, just little inconveniences of like, oh, well, someone didn't hold the door open for me, you know? I mean, unless you notice it's a repeated pattern, then, you know, it has to be offensive to a reasonable person, so keep that in mind. And then it has to interfere with the ability to work, and it has to create an offensive, intimidating, or hostile work environment. So again, these things meet the severe or pervasive standard. And then talking a little bit about unwelcome behavior in terms of sexual harassment. So sexual conduct becomes sexual harassment when the behavior is unwelcome. Obviously, I'm sure everybody knows that. Behavior may be unwelcome in the sense that the victim did not solicit it or invite it, or in the sense that the victim regarded the conduct as undesirable or effective. However, welcome behavior can quickly become unwelcome behavior. What starts off as welcome, such as consensual joking, can cross a line and it can become unwelcome behavior. This is something that gets a lot of people. And as far as a third one as well, consent can be revoked at any time. When someone is experiencing sexual harassment behavior and they say, stop talking to me like this, it has to stop. The perpetrator cannot use the defense of, well, you started it, or you were okay with it at first. That's not a defense. So remember, there's always that line in the workplace. You can joke. Nobody's saying don't joke, but you have to be serious and you have to be, you know, just not having fun at work. Of course, you can have fun, all in good nature, but this is why we always advise to stay away from discussing protected characteristics. Don't be talking about age, don't be talking about religion, don't be talking about race, background, all of those things. And certainly don't joke about it. I mean, even if the other person is making jokes about themselves, just don't participate, because that person can turn like this and say, I'm not okay with this, and they can report you. And you cannot say, well, she was fine with it 5 months, all the 5 months before. That's not a defense. You will get in trouble, you will be disciplined, and you can be terminated. So just stay away from that. Now, who can be a victim of sexual harassment? Anybody, not just women. A lot of people think sexual harassment and they think women as a victim, but no. Anybody can experience it, regardless of gender, sexual orientation, or gender identity. Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, there have been some cases where men are the victim of sexual harassment and they don't report it, and the company doesn't find out until there's already another investigation going on. And it's sad to see how people don't feel comfortable reporting it because they don't know. They think, I can't report sexual harassment because I'm a man, but that's not true. Anybody can be a victim. And so Also, not just the actual target of the harassment can be a victim, but also third parties and bystanders. So if you're notice a conversation that two other employees are having, and they're saying inappropriate things about a certain race or gender or age, and you feel disrespected, even though you're not involved in that conversation and it's not directed towards you, you could certainly report it as a bystander. In fact, we encourage that you report it, so does Quail-Run, and we'll learn a little bit more about that. Same thing, who can be the harasser? Anybody, a supervisor, a coworker, a contractor, a vendor, a customer, or another third party. It's not just other employees, it's not just people in your same rank. It can be up, it can be below, it can be people that come into the property, contractors, anybody, certainly report it. And it can occur involving individuals of the same or different genders. Same thing below, it can occur involving individuals of the same or different religions, ethnicities, or other protected categories. So don't assume, oh, I'm an older person, I can joke about age with another older person and it won't be considered discrimination. Yes, it will. It doesn't matter if you belong to the same protected category, just don't talk about it. Because what might not be offensive to you, it's probably offensive to somebody else. So just don't talk about that. And so here are a few examples of what can be harassing behavior. Suggestive or lewd comments, unwanted hugs, touching, kisses, groping, repeated requests for dates. This one, seems a little weird, but this does happen a lot. I actually see a lot of claims regarding this. People think it's appropriate to just, stalk others at work and not take no for an answer, and it is harassing behavior. Requests for sexual favors, unfortunately, that does happen as well. Sexually explicit communications in any form, electronic pictures, text, social media. Don't think that just because you're behind a screen talking to your employee outside of work that you're protected from all of this. You are not. If there's an investigation going on, Tanya will talk more about that, but if she's in the middle of an investigation, somebody reported a text, and they show that text, Tanya will see it. If it's more serious, if she needs to come to me, I will see it. We can also subpoena phone records. So you don't think that just because you're behind the screen on your little cell phone, your laptop, whatever it might be, that this doesn't apply. It most certainly does. And this actually happens a lot more often because, right, people communicate through phones a lot more often now. And inquiring into personal lives or discussing sex lives, definitely don't do that. Whistling or cat calls, comments on clothing, body, anatomy, that also happens very often. You might think that you're giving an innocent compliment by telling somebody, oh, that shirt looks good on you. Don't say that. That can be harassing, it can be sexually harassing. So just refrain from making comments like these. And as far as behavior, also staring, leering, winking, suggestive looks or gestures, same thing. So remember, it's not just verbal conduct, it's also your actual behavioral conduct as well. Okay, where can harassment occur? Not just here, not just at Quail-Run. It can happen at offsite events. Sometimes you may have to go to certain events and gatherings that's not a Quail-Run. It could be at a brewery or whatever it may be. These laws and Quail-Run's policy applies to that as well. So don't think that just because you're not here that you can just run off and do whatever you want. No, it still applies. I talked about this earlier, but also calls, texts, emails, social media, same thing. Don't assume that just because it's through your private social media accounts that you're engaging in this inappropriate behavior with coworkers, that Quail-Run won't be allowed to see it, won't be allowed to investigate it. No, they can, because harassing behavior that in any way affects the work environment is the concern of management. So under the law, Quail-Run does have the obligation and the right to look at whatever is reported. So even if it's a text message that was reported, if somebody gives that screenshot over, They will look at it, don't think that it's protected because you were discussing this off of Quail-Run property. And what are your rights if you experience, witness, or become aware of harassment? Well, first, you definitely have the right to tell the person to stop. And as I've been repeating several times, you have the right to report the sexual harassment or the harassment if it's not sexual in nature. These are not a two-step process. You can do either or. If you don't want to tell a person to stop, you can go straight to reporting. If you don't feel comfortable reporting and you just want to talk to the person and ask them to stop, you can do that. You can just do that as well. But you have the choice, whatever you want to do. And it's important to learn about reporting or what to do when you do experience this, because Quail-Run has a zero tolerance policy. Harassing conduct violates the policy, even if it's illegal or not. And any harassing behavior will be investigated. Disciplinary action will be taken as appropriate. Of course, repeated behavior is definitely serious. It's going to be a lot more serious if something keeps happening over and over again. And as I mentioned, disciplinary action can include termination. Tanya will talk a little bit more about disciplinary action and all of that. So now we're going into bullying and what exactly that is. So here are just a few examples of bullying behaviors, which are flaunting status, right? You don't want to go around saying, oh, well, they promoted me, not you, obviously, taking credit for somebody else's work, also considered bullying. Ignoring a coworker's contributions, preventing the expression of opinions, shouting, obviously, gossiping, manipulating someone's job content, excluding someone from meetings, the silent treatment, foul language, blaming others for mistakes, mean pranks. So literally think back to being a kid and, getting taught of not bullying. And this applies to the workplace as adults as well. And it's sad that we still have to keep bringing this up because you would think that as adults, people would refrain from such behavior, but it happens. People gossip about each other, and a lot of people think, it's all good and fun. Like I'm just, talking about somebody else, and I'm not saying anything, super offensive, but it's still bullying. You might not be actually talking about someone's protected characteristic, but you are bullying them by talking about them. They can definitely go and report that. So, and you can do that as well. If you hear that someone's gossiping about you, even if it's not based off of a protected characteristic, you have the right to report it. So here are just some sample bullying statistics. 35% of American workers have reported being bullied now or at some time in their careers. 15% reported observing bullying, and 40% never tell their employers. These are particularly concerning percentages because we wouldn't like to see this to be so high. But a lot of people don't know the rights. A lot of people don't know when to report. A lot of people hear about harassment, but they don't know what exactly constitutes it. And a lot of people are also afraid. They're afraid of reporting and feeling embarrassed and feeling singled out. Essentially, they're afraid of retaliation. And you should know that retaliation is illegal. And we'll talk about that a little bit more later on, but unfortunately, this is how high these numbers are. And it's because of this. It's because people don't tell their employers. And, unfortunately, there's not much that can be done besides do these trainings to keep people aware of what they can do. And so who's the responsible party? 43% of bullying comes from coworkers. That's where the majority of the bullying comes from. Next is supervisors. And after that, it's customers, subordinates, and others. So remember the others, the contractors, third parties, all of that. And some effects of bullying are, of course, it leads to workplace violence, people just not getting along, yelling at each other, and then that tends to lead to either medical or workers' comp claims because people, they do get heart problems, they get blood pressure because they don't feel safe at work. So that does affect people's health. Of course, we do see reduction in productivity and morale. Obviously, if you feel like you're experiencing discrimination ongoing in the workplace, you're definitely going to be less productive. Your morale will be lower. I mean, it's obvious, if you're not happy, you're not going to want to do a lot. Psychological and emotional injuries, we've seen anxiety, we've seen panic attacks, we've seen depression. I've had a lot of claims where people do sue for hostile work environment, bullying, and this increases their damages. They claim anxiety, they claim depression. It's just more money, so you don't want to be on the other side of that, and you definitely don't want to be the one experiencing that. And lastly, some people are forced to quit or transfer to another job, and that's known as constructive discharge, which is another legally recognized claim. Basically, what that means is you were forced to quit because nothing was done. You either reported the behavior, or maybe you didn't, but it was ongoing. You went to somebody and nothing was done, and nothing has changed, and you're experiencing all of these, or maybe just one, or whatever it might be, and you feel like you have to leave your job because there's no other option. That's constructive discharge, and that's a very serious legal claim, and that's not what Quail-Run wants. That's why they encourage you to report, because everything that you report will be taken seriously, so that you are not forced to do this. Okay, I talked a little bit about federal and state laws, but the big federal one is Title VII, which states, it's unlawful for an employment practice for an employer to fail or refuse to hire or to discharge or otherwise discriminate against any individual with respect to his compensation, terms, conditions, or privileges of employment because of an individual's protected characteristic. So it lists a few there. That's the language of the actual law, but it's protected characteristic, and the list goes on and on. So right here is where the government keeps adding characteristics. And then we also have the New Mexico Human Rights Act, which is just another Title VII, but the New Mexico Human Rights Act is more broad. It gives broader protection, and part of that is what I was talking about earlier, where the New Mexico Human Rights Act recognized pregnancy as a protected characteristic before the federal law did. And same thing with gender identity. Now that we're having all these discussions about what gender identity is, this is included in the New Mexico Human Rights Act. Title VII does not have gender identity in it as of yet, but no, it does. Yes, it does. But it did not have it up until very recently. The NMHRA had it before Title VII. So it's just an example of you have more rights under the NMHRA, but Quail-Run has both, as it should, federal and state laws. So now we're going to get into Quail-Run policy specifically. The complaint procedure basically states that upon receipt of a verbal or written complaint of discrimination or harassment, Quail-Run will investigate, and if appropriate, they will take prompt action. They will maintain confidentiality. So what that means is if you report something, you're not going to know what's actually going on. I mean, they might tell you there's an ongoing investigation. We're going to interview witnesses that you've named, but they're not allowed to tell you what's going to happen to the perpetrator. They're not going to tell you, oh yeah, we're going to terminate that person. Oh yeah, we're going to write them up. They can't say that. So don't expect that. Don't think that just because they don't tell you that it's illegal. It's actually illegal for them to tell you, because that's the confidentiality portion of encouraging reports. You want to feel protected. You want to feel that whatever you say, nobody's going to know about it. And vice versa, if maybe you accidentally were involved in some inappropriate conduct, whatever it might be, you don't want to be shunned. You want to be so protected. It's all confidential. So that's part of the confidentiality thing. And retaliation. Quail-Run strictly prohibits retaliation, as it should, because it is illegal. So just know that even if you report something, don't be afraid. Your no term or condition of your employment will change just because you reported something. And if it does, that is retaliation. It wouldn't happen here because this is why I'm here, and we have helped Quail-Run craft their policy, so you're definitely in good hands here. But just so you know, retaliation is not something you should experience. So do not be afraid to report. Okay, moving on to supervisors and the duty that they have. Under the law, they are required to report any harassment that is reported to them. So if you're not comfortable going to HR, if you're not comfortable moving forward with your own formal complaint, but you tell your supervisor, just take that as you're going to HR anyway. Because legally, if you say to your supervisor that you're experiencing harassment, that you're experiencing bullying, they are legally required to take that to HR. So keep that in mind, as they are responsible for any harassment or discrimination that they should have known of with reasonable care and attention to the workplace for which they are responsible. So what this means is that a supervisor can't claim that he had no idea that his subordinates were engaging in harassing behavior. A supervisor cannot claim that. So don't assume that, oh, I can't report because, my supervisor has no idea, he's not present, he's not seeing this, but he should, he or she should. They know, they should be aware of this responsibility that they have, and they need to be attentive to what their subordinates are doing. And of course, they are expected to model appropriate workplace behavior. Unfortunately, there are a lot of times where supervisors are also engaging in very bad jokes, in harassment, and that shouldn't be happening. And so if you see that, definitely report it. Don't be afraid that just because they're supervisors that, Quail-Run won't take the report seriously. They will. It's actually under the law, because supervisors have these requirements under the law does crack down harder on a supervisor and a fellow coworker. Okay, bystanders also have a duty to report. If you see harassing behavior going on, you see bullying, you can't just ignore it and walk away and then just claim that you had nothing to do with it. If you were there, if you were present, and there's an investigation opened up and they find out that you were aware and you simply didn't report, you could also be disciplined for that, because this is why you have to know the policy and you have to be actively engaged and aware to foster a positive work environment, because you can't just see this and turn the other cheek. As I said, you can be held accountable for failing to report. So because you will have that responsibility if you are a bystander, a few strategies for what you can do if you see something is, first of all, it's important to recognize the offense and acknowledge it, right? So, maybe you can interrupt or intervene. You can speak up, you can tell somebody in the moment and say, you shouldn't say that because, that's inappropriate conduct, whatever it might be. You can try to defuse the situation as well. You can talk to the person, you can talk to the victim, you want to pull them aside and say, hey, I noticed that, you were experiencing some nasty comments about your age or your religion, whatever it might be. Do you want to report it? Do you want to come with you? I can be a witness, help that person out. You can do that as well. Or you can just go straight to get help. If you don't want to get involved, that's fine. You can just go straight to HR, supervisor, whatever it might be. And you can also just go straight to reporting, but don't do it alone. It's important to know that you're not alone. There are resources here at Quail-Run, and nobody wants you to feel alone. Even if you're a bystander, even if you're not sure what to do, get help if that's the best thing for you to do. If you're not sure what to do yourself, just get help. And what if you are accused of harassment? Hopefully that does not happen, but it might. So if that does happen, stop any questionable conduct. Just going back to be professional, take the situation seriously, and immediately contact the appropriate management or HR personnel. Maintain discretion. It's actually bad as well for you to, if you think that somebody reported you, don't go telling everybody else. You're just fostering retaliation, so don't do that. Maintain discretion. And the last one, be professional. I know I'm repeating myself over and over with this, but people don't know what that means, or people forget it. And so you really have to just maintain that no matter what. And as I mentioned earlier, maintaining discretion, don't do anything that could be construed as retaliation. Don't treat that person differently. Don't make their work harder or their day harder than it needs to be, because now on top of the inappropriate conduct that they reported, now they have a retaliation claim. So don't do anything, just be professional. And then, if you're not sure if something is harassing or discrimination, just go ahead and report it. There's nothing wrong with reporting something. Tanya will be mad at you. HR will be mad at you. You're not going to get in trouble. It's best practice to just report something that might seem questionable to you. It will be investigated. And if it's actually not inappropriate, then nothing will happen. You're not going to get anybody in trouble if they actually didn't do anything wrong. But if you're not sure, just go ahead and report it. There's nothing wrong with that. We want to encourage reporting as much as possible so that everybody is comfortable, everyone is happy. And so if you do want to report, here at Quail-Run, your policy states that you should immediately contact your GM or HR. However, if your complaints are against either the GM or HR, then just contact the next person in the chain of command. Just keep moving up. You don't have to go to the GM if your complaint is against him or her. And also any other supervisor or manager that you're comfortable speaking to. Because remember, any supervisor or manager has the legal duty to report. So even if they're not HR and you want to go to them instead, if you're more comfortable with that supervisor, they'll report it for you because they have to. And then your policy also states that if you have lodged a complaint and have not received a response within 5 business days, contact the GM immediately. And so this goes with this. If you complain against the GM and you haven't received an initial response within 5 days, just go to the next supervisor. But that's what your policy states. You should receive an initial response within 5 business days. They won't tell you what's actually going on because they're not allowed to because of the confidentiality, but you will receive some form of response. You will be acknowledged. You'll know that your report is being handled. And once an issue is raised, whether formally or informally, an investigation will occur. Like I said, no matter how small the report is, no matter if you're not sure if it actually is an appropriate conduct, it will be investigated, so don't worry about that. HR will look into it. Appropriate individuals will review the allegations. They will take interim actions as appropriate, meaning that they can review relevant documents, relevant emails, phone records, text messages. So remember, this goes back to what I mentioned earlier. If you're texting someone, if you're talking to someone on social media, this is why you're not protected there. This still applies. If an investigation is opened, they move through those messages. Or, someone's probably even taking screenshots to save, to send to HR. So don't forget, interviews will be conducted with parties involved and witnesses if applicable. If you witness something inappropriate happening, you report it, and there were other people there, you can certainly name those people. Those people will probably be questioned, or they may not. It depends on how the investigation goes, but interviews will happen. And if there are no witnesses, if you don't name anybody, that's fine. But each investigation is based on this specific set of facts. It's not it's not a formula for all. It's really just depends on circumstances. And of course, appropriate individuals will be notified of the determination and that administrative action has been taken. This does not mean that you'll know what happened to the abuser. They're not going to tell you, yeah, we're going to fire him, but you will be known that action has been taken. And that's pretty much as much as you'll know. because again, everything is confidential. Okay, I mentioned retaliation a little bit earlier, but this is also a legally recognized claim. Don't be afraid of reporting because it is illegal for the company to retaliate against you or a supervisor to retaliate against you. So, if you make a claim of discrimination, if you report it, if you participate in the investigation, if you were called as a witness, don't be scared. Don't be scared of going and testifying. Don't be scared of going and talking to Tanya about what you saw, because you will not get in trouble for it. It's illegal for you to, so keep that in mind. Or if you exercise any of the right. So this talks about reasonable accommodation. If you have an injury, you need some time off, FMLA, want to request it, whatever it may be, retaliation applies to that. Just because you asked for time off due to an injury or whatever it may be, it's illegal for you to be treated differently just because you did that, because that is a protected activity. So whenever you engage in protected activity, you are protected from retaliation. Any term, condition, or benefit of your employment cannot change because retaliation is unlawful. So some takeaways. Monitor your own behavior. Take a minute to think about whether what you're doing is respectful, whether it's professional. As I mentioned before, a lot of people assume that they are being professional, but sometimes they're not. So take a moment to really think about what you're doing, what you're saying. Do not engage in unwelcome sexual or protected category-based conduct. Remember everything we discussed about today. Just because you belong to a certain group and you're talking to somebody who belongs to the same group, just don't talk about things like that, okay? Don't make jokes about your age. Don't make jokes about your religion. Even if that person belongs to the same religion, just don't, because there could be a bystander, There could be somebody hearing you, and now you engage in inappropriate activities, so just don't do it. Understand and reinforce company policies. That's that same handbook that you signed at the beginning of your employment. I encourage you all to go home and take another look at it, because that spells out your rights a little bit more. You'll see more of that language. And it's better to have it a little bit more fresh in your mind. Of course, report complaints and incidents of harassment to supervisors or HR as soon as possible. As soon as possible. If this happened today, you don't have to go running, but definitely do it as soon as you can. Don't wait. Don't say, oh, it's whatever, I'll just do it in a month or so. No, the sooner you do it, the more prompt an investigation can be started, and the faster that there will be a result, the faster that the conduct will be taken care of. Cooperate with investigations. If you get asked questions, please cooperate, don't be afraid. Violations of the company's EEO and/or discrimination, harassment, and retaliation policies can result in discipline up to and including termination. So don't forget, it's very important that you do report, because maybe, no matter how small you think it is, maybe the conduct really is serious. Maybe the investigation will reveal if this person has a pattern of doing this conduct. Maybe they were already disciplined, you wouldn't know because it's confidential. But maybe they were already disciplined and now they have to be terminated, right? It's better to get rid of these problems. And so we can only do this if you report. Okay, does anybody have any questions?
So we're going to talk a little bit about the role of HR. I think it's important for you as employees to really know not just what I do, but really what I'm here for, right? I think most employees, especially throughout time, kind of forget that HR even exists, right? Or you're not really even sure if that's the place you're supposed to go, right? So we're going to talk a little bit about that. We're going to go over a little bit, a short introduction of myself so you know really where I am, where I come from type of thing. What my role is in HR, right, at Quail-Run. Regarding concerns, how do you know that you're being supported by HR. I think that's really important, along with how can you help as an employee. So a little bit about me. I've been in HR for more than 15 years. I know I look 19, but that's okay. It's been a while. I did not get my undergraduate in HR. After graduation, I just happened to fall into a position with a temp agency to work as a recruiter. And I just fell into it, really. And ever since then, I've been in HR. So this is something that I do, something that's a huge passion of mine, especially because of the bilingual piece, right? I grew up, I'm the oldest of four. So I grew up having to go with my mom and my grandparents to go and apply at jobs. I was their translator. I filled out the applications. So, you know, being a 9-year-old and doing that, right, that's a lot of responsibility, but at the same time, I enjoyed it, right, because I was helping them. So I didn't necessarily know that that was HR, right? I didn't know that that's what I had to do with, but it's kind of odd how things surface, right? And so for me, HR to me is more team-oriented, regardless of the fact that I'm a department of one, right? I don't necessarily have a coworker, right, to share the successes, but I want to make sure that you know that I'm part of your team, right? I'm an employee as well, right? And so a lot of what I do is making sure that you as a team, as an organization, are flourishing and that we're doing everything possible so that you know, right, that you're being heard. So that you know that we're here to do whatever we can to make Quail-Run an employer of choice, right? I'm typically driven by you, right? If you don't give me the ability to share my skills, share my knowledge and help, then I'm not doing the best job that I can, right? So we are each other's successes. The more that you can rely on making sure that we're doing everything that we can, right? That's gonna be my driver, right? That's what I'm going to be doing this whole time. So just by a show of hands, how many of you know what I do on a day-to-day? Yeah, sounds about right. That's good. Which is okay. This is kind of like a little summary, if you will, but there's more detail behind it. But recruitment, right? Bringing people in from the out, hoping that they will join our organization as an employee. Onboarding, which is really the process between from making an offer to them starting, right? Employee relations, so once you're here. Benefits, training and development, which is what we have today, right? Present day. Compliance and policy, employee records management, unemployment, terminations and resignations, job descriptions, company best practices, employee events, which awesome day yesterday for golf. Management advisor. So I do, and I am responsible for advising our management, right? Payroll, disciplinary action, and there's just a lot more with that. But this is the big, large scope of what I do on my day-to-day. Now, most of my day, I want to say about 60% of my day are all these 5 categories, which is really a lot of what we touched on today, right? So employee relations, compliance and policy, company best practices, advising management, along with disciplinary action. That's a large part of my day-to-day, right? And so with that, what I'm expecting is that we rise by lifting others, right? It shouldn't just be HR, it shouldn't just be management, right? I think collectively, we should be able to rise by lifting each other up, right? Your growth in the company is not just what you put in. Your growth in the company should be what we as management, right, offer you and the support that we provide to you. If you want to come in and all you want to do is be a cook, that's awesome, right? But if you want to keep growing and you want to keep learning, it's our responsibility to help nourish that. And if we don't do that, right, then what's the point, right? If you want to be a cook, awesome, right? If you want to be just in engineering, that's great, right? But we're here to support each other and do whatever we can to give you that path that you're looking for, all right? So regarding concerns, so how do you know that you're being supported by HR? Well, first and foremost, either you or your manager is going to approach HR with your problem, right? With your concern, with your issue. Asterisk, though, keep in mind, right? Don't rely only on your manager to let HR know. What I don't know, right? You don't assume that your manager let me know. Right? I know it sounds negative to say, but that's the honest truth, right? Sometimes we just don't think that that's, that it's that important or that it's that much of a big deal, because management sometimes just wants to handle things at the lowest level possible, which makes sense. If they can find resolution, that's great, right? But if I don't know about it and it actually surfaces to become something huge, right, just come to me, right? Just let me know. Because if I don't know, then I'm not there to help support you as the employee, right? I'm not there to help support and enforce all of the policies that we have in place as an employer, right? So just keep that in mind. What I do after knowing, right, is I ask for a meeting to meet with you. I want to be able to figure out what's going on. Do you have documents? Do you have pictures, texts, whatever, right? Whatever the whole experience is, I want to be able to meet with you, right? It's part of the investigation process, if you will. With that, I start to review, research, talk to witnesses if that's the case. I really look into it, right? Because it matters. I may or may not have to consult others, meaning I may have to consult counsel, right? I may have to consult general manager, right? I may have to consult with the manager themselves. It just depends on the situation, right? So I've got to do my due diligence. I can't just leave it within me all of the time, right? Especially if it's something egregious. Egregious enough where I'm like, I think this is really going to be more serious than anybody thought, right? That's my role there. And then there's a closure meeting. Now, know that your closure meeting might not always feel like the end result that you wanted, right? Because let's be honest, sometimes something happens, we're so involved to the point where like, this is not fair, this is not, going well, and you think, just fire them, right? You want to fire them. And sometimes we can't, right? Sometimes we have legal reason why we can't. But it doesn't mean that's the end all. It just means that we have to find other resolutions, right? We have to find other ways to handle the situation. So I'm not going to tell you, hey, by the way, just so you know, I brought up so-and-so. That's not fair either, right? Would you want that? Do you want somebody else doing that? Probably not, right? So there are going to be things that I can't necessarily share with you, but I can certainly tell you, okay, this is how we're going to handle it, right? This is what the end result is. If there's any issues after, right? Let me know, because I don't want retaliation. I don't want that for you, right? And I want to make sure that we nip it, right? If somebody is not willing to respect the fact that retaliation is a no, right? It's a no-no, then maybe they shouldn't be here, right? So all of these things are things that you have to keep in mind when it comes down to that. So I want to provide as much closure as possible, right? But it might not always be the way that you think it needs to be, all right? So how can you really help? Well, a lot of it is that I want you to know that we should be able to maintain communication lines as open as possible, right? I want you to be a good coworker, right? I want you to be able to be part of the solution as opposed to part of the problem. More importantly, you should know who your audience is, right? As Melina was saying, right? You might be the best of coworkers and things might be really great, but you don't always know someone totally to know if you've made them feel uncomfortable, if you've said something to them, right? You just don't always know that, but be aware of who your audience is, right? Because anything can be reported, just know that. And then there's the open door policy. So Quail-Run has an open door policy, right? But I take it very literal, okay? And I take it very intentional. How many of you have actually seen the sign on my door? Okay. For those of you that haven't, it might be because my door's open, right? For those that have seen it, you typically know if I'm in a meeting, virtual meeting, if I'm out of the office, if I'm on vacation, right? You'll know because I put a little strip that says where I am, right? And I want that to be so intentional because I want you to know, right, that either I might be back or you might need to come back later for whatever reason, but that you know. Because my door ultimately tries to be as open as it can be every time that I'm here. Why? Because I need to listen. I need to hear you out. If somebody's in my office and it's something that's serious, right? It's going to be, Tanya, can you come see me, right? When you have a chance, or can you just call me when you're done? And it's because I need to be able to have the opportunity to give you the chance to speak, to give you the chance to express, right? If I don't do that for you, then where else are you going to go, right? I don't want you to assume that I don't care. I don't want you to assume that by rumor or, gossip that, oh, well, she's only gonna help so-and-so, or I see most people, or that you are even afraid to be like, I don't know if I wanna go to HR because people watch me go in there, right? My office shouldn't be taboo, right? But I'm there. The door is always open, as much as it can be, right? Feel free to make sure that you know that and that you take that to the extent that you can, right? Because that's my job, right? So outside of saying thank you for coming today, just know I've put together a form where you can report, anything that you feel is not necessarily that goes up against the EEOC, right? So all those protected classes, anytime that something like that surfaces and you know that you feel in your heart of hearts that you have to report it, I'm gonna have this form, right? And it's gonna be available online and it's gonna be available to you as an employee, okay? Now, I highly encourage you to put your name on it, right? You can make it anonymous, just know that it's gonna be that much difficult to kind of research, right? Because I don't know who I'm supposed to talk to, unless you give me more information and names, right? But it's there for you. It's there for you to make sure that you feel like you can go somewhere and make that report, especially if you feel like somebody's watching you walk into my office, all right? Otherwise, you can just feel free to walk in.